Hello, and welcome to another edition of Mine Wars Forum. This is episode 3, and we'll be talking with Roger May in a few moments about photography in the coalfields and his recent collaboration with the Mine Wars Museum. For those of you who want to support our work and support the museum, please click on the link below and either become a member or go to our online store to buy merchandise, hats, t-shirts, mugs like the ones I have on here, or just donate directly to the museum. So we hope that you enjoy this program, and we hope that you can continue to support the Mine Wars Museum. Thanks. So hi, Roger. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. For those of you that don't know, Roger's a photographer here in West Virginia and a newly minted creeker now on Alum Creek. For those people that don't know what I'm talking about there, we have just south of Charleston, there are these two communities. There's South Hills, right across the river from downtown Charleston. And the people in South Hills are called Hillers. And a few miles south of that, you have Alum Creek, which is where I grew up. And the people who live there are called Creekers. And there's always been this kind of, I don't know, little regional kind of interaction between the Hillers and the Creekers. The Creekers think that the Hillers are stuck up, and the Hillers sometimes think the Creekers are, a little backwoods or whatever. But yeah, you are a voluntary Creeker. So I hope you enjoy it down there. You're surrounded by my relatives, by the way, where you live. It's
well, we're looking forward to being there full time. It's beautiful out there, and I mean it's really something. So
yeah, well, I'm glad you're out there.
Looking forward to it.
Well, it's like I said, you're surrounded by relatives of mine. Anywhere you turn, if you pull out of your driveway, you're going to run into a relative of mine. So that'll be an interesting adventure for you. But we're here to talk about your photography and to talk about your collaboration with the museum. And let's go back. Before you were in Alum Creek, before you grew up on the Tug River. Now, you grew up in Mingo County, right?
Yeah. Not far at all from Mate One. I grew up in Chattaroy. And all my dad's people are from the Pike County, Kentucky side of the Tug, and all Mom's people are from Mingo County on the West Virginia side. So I get sometimes to claim dual citizenship during, basketball and football season. But
did you go to Mate One High School?
No, so we moved to North Carolina when I finished grade school, and I came back for a semester my sophomore year and lived with my dad and played basketball at Belfry over on the Kentucky side. And then kind of got, things lined out back home and moved back to North Carolina with my mom, and was gone until 3 years ago. Just got to come back to West Virginia 3 years ago. So they've been doing a lot of traveling back and forth, visiting home and making pictures here, but felt like it was time to get back and get to work.
Why did you come back? What brought you back here?
Well, I always knew I wanted to come back, and North Carolina was where my mom moved us to as kids. She was a single parent, struggling to kind of get by, and she thought North Carolina would be a fresh start and that it would be a good opportunity for us, in terms of school and access to art and museums and that sort of thing. A lot of technology happening in the Research Triangle Park and so on. And but it was never really home. I spent a good deal of time there. When I got out of the Army, I moved back there because it's where I could find a job, and worked there for close to 20 years before I decided to head back to West Virginia. And the real turning point for me was, I think, the water crisis in 2014, when I came here to photograph the crisis for The Guardian. And when I was here, it really just impressed upon me the difference between being here and doing the work and being somewhere else and coming here to do the work. And I mean, like the capital W work, not just kind of dropping in and dropping out. And it was really hard after being here a few days and seeing what everybody was going through to get in my car and drive back to North Carolina, 300 miles away, and be able to take a hot shower and drink the water from the tap, and all the while knowing that so many people here were affected by this. And so that really, again, I always knew I wanted to come back, but that really sort of set things in motion for me to figure out a roadmap to get back.
Well, yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know why exactly you would come back after so many years gone. And it's the water. I always tell my students, West Virginia history over the last 75 years roughly is a history of people moving away and coming back again, moving away and coming back again. And everybody who lives here has family members either in Carolina, in Florida. In the 50s and 60s, a lot of people were moving to Detroit and Akron and those places, Cincinnati. Once you get into the 80s and 90s, a lot of families are moving south. So there's this West Virginia presence all over the eastern United States. But people want to come back. There's kind of a love-hate relationship sometimes. Sometimes you want to get as far away from West Virginia as humanly possible, and other times you just it's just in your blood, and you can't get away from it.
Yeah, and I think that's how my mom maybe still feels like when she left. I mean, she was okay with being gone, and she found a new life in North Carolina and loves it there, and I'm happy for her. But for me, it always felt like a temporary station, like in the military, it felt, I can set up shop and be anywhere for as long as I need to be, but it never feels like home, like it does, in your bones when you're here. And I had just lived enough life away from here that, I was just ready to get back and get plugged back in.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did. And I think we're better off to have more people coming back, more people like you coming back. A lot of people know you from the Looking at Appalachia project. That's one of the projects that's really prominent that you've been involved in. For the people watching this that don't know what that is, will you tell us a little bit about the project and where it is right now?
Sure, yeah. So in early 2014, it sort of dawned on me that was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of the War on Poverty, and that it was a significant milestone. And it also had me thinking, what's changed about Appalachia over the course of 5 decades, and what hasn't. And particularly with regard to the visual representation of the region, I felt like there was still a lot of visual stereotypes and tropes about the region that were being perpetuated. You did an online, search online for Appalachia, you would get all kinds of incredibly stereotypical images, as a result of that search. And I just thought about, what could possibly be done, or what could foster conversation around that. And I started, kind of looking around and reaching out to a few people, seeing if anybody knew of any kind of project that, might be in the works, or if anybody was working on any kind of long form project. And I didn't really find anything that was similar to kind of what I had in mind. And so I put a call out on Instagram, in February of 2014 and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. If you live in, an Appalachian County, share some work from where you are, or if you've made work, even if you're not from an Appalachian County and you just made work there this year, being 2014, consider sharing it." And pretty soon, I started getting messages and emails and so on, and people were really excited about the possibility of doing a project like this or being involved in it. And so I think it was just this kind of weird convergence of time and motivation and interest and engagement, and it all kind of met at this really sort of transformative time for me. And I built a website and realized pretty quickly that we were starting to get inundated with images, and I didn't want to be a singular voice to filter all of those images. I felt like in most cases the narrative that's out there is largely white and largely male, and I didn't want to be that filter through which all of these images were coming and then deciding what gets included in the project and what doesn't. And so I reached out to a handful of friends and peers, people whose work that I trusted and admired and whose aesthetic that I appreciated, and asked them to sort of serve as an editorial team and sort of help me vote these images in to the project. And really the purpose of the project was to serve as sort of a visual counterpoint to the narrative that we've all been so introduced to and reminded of year after year after year of what Appalachia looks like. And that historically has looked like largely white, largely rural, poor living conditions, dirty kids running around barefoot with, rundown cars in the front yard and ramshackle houses and so on. And the attempt was not at all to shy away from those instances or those examples of people or poverty, but rather to show that, hey, there's a lot more to this region than just that. And in some way it became this process by which people started being able to reclaim the narrative of the place. They were able to sort of take charge of the output of the visual output of the region. And so 2020, here we are. The project is still very much alive, and we just updated the website with last year's work. We accept work on a calendar year basis. So throughout the year, we ask people to submit work from the current calendar year. That usually doesn't happen too often. We tend to get most of the submissions right at the tail end of the year. I think people are just caught up living life and doing their thing. And then, around December 30th, they're like, oh man, I forgot I've got images I want to submit to the project. And so my inbox usually blows up on, New Year's Eve. And then we spend a month or two kind of sorting through those. And then I take those once they've been voted in and upload them to the website and include the location and the photographer's name and a link to their website and that sort of thing. So it takes a little bit of time because this is sort of a passion project. I don't, we're not grant funded. We don't have staff. It's me that manages the website and uploads the content and makes sure the links work and all that. But the editorial team does a tremendous amount of work in helping me review images as they come in, and that's where a bulk of the work is done. But that's kind of a snapshot of the project overall.
It's a vast project, and I think it's really great, and I hope people that watch this will check it out online. You touched on something, though, that I want to get back to in regards to your photography and in regards to, the project looking at Appalachia. Do you think, I've been using the term since 2015, identity reclamation, to talk about what we're doing at the museum, about how we're reclaiming our narrative. And you mentioned that in talking about looking at Appalachia. Do you see your photography and the photography in this project as a method of identity reclamation? And how do you think that fits? How do you think we're doing in that identity reclamation process?
Well, I appreciate that term. It's not one that I was familiar with prior to reading your email, and then it just kind of clicked. I do in some way feel like that's what it is, although I don't know that was the intention at the outset, either with my work or with looking at Appalachia Project. But I do think there's some teeth to that, and that it hits in a way that I really do like.
When I think of reclamation, I think of it in terms of a surface mining site. When they reclaim a site, you can't change the fact that the mountain has already been damaged, that there's already been a lot of scars that you can't fully cover up.
Right.
So you do what you can with what you have. And I think of it in those terms. You can't undo all the, what you want to call poverty porn photos of the 60s, and those, like the Christmas in Appalachia news special that you may have seen online on YouTube and things like that. Those things are out there. They always exist. But this newer wave that I've seen over the last decade in the arts and photography and writings is that you have a generation, Gen Xers and millennials are coming in and are trying to take control of that Appalachian narrative. And I don't think it's originated with any one person or any one project, but I've really seen it a lot in the last decade, and it's an encouraging thing to see.
Yeah, it's nice to see something being taken, not necessarily from here, but taken and kind of plowed back into here. There's been so much that's been extracted from the region, and identity and visuals are certainly one of them, and along with natural resources and human resource extraction and those kinds of things. But it's nice to it's nice to see the power shift in people being able to, I'm not one who says give people voice, because I believe everybody's got a voice. It's just some get amplified more than others. And it's nice to see that through sort of the democratization of photography, that's a tool and a vehicle that can be used to amplify the voice of people who typically are looked over, and as well as I do that, every so often, Appalachia is like a hot thing, and it seems like every now and then it kind of pops up and we're like rediscovered somehow.
Yeah, every 30 years or so. Yeah.
Yeah, and then somebody over at Apple Shop, I think, said this. I haven't been able to source it properly, but that everybody wants to be a hillbilly, but nobody wants to drink the water. And like there's this notion of like ramps and Molly Moocher, all these things that people want to be, they're cool and they're kind of faddish or whatever, and all that's fine. I mean, I grew up in Mingo County, and never once in my life had I eaten a ramp, or probably had ever even seen a ramp.
Yeah.
And and now it's like the Appalachian staple, and that's, again, fine. I love ramps, but I think
ramps and Mothman. Everybody's into those ideas. You're right. Yeah. It's romanticized a bit.
Yeah.
There's this romanticization, I think, that comes along with it, and people sometimes romanticize the folksiness, the rural lifestyle, the getting away from the urban atmosphere. Yeah, there's some of that. It gets rediscovered in a variety of these ways, and you can kind of look at that with, like some of that's happening now that was also happened in the 60s with the vistas, and in the 30s with the New Deal workers coming in and wanting all the old ladies to do quilt projects and things like that. So yeah, every generation or so, it gets rediscovered, and almost both ideas, the romanticized version and then the stereotypical version, I think.
And that's where we're trying, both as a project with looking at Appalachia and as just an individual working photographer, is like I'm trying to find the balance between those two, right? I don't want to take it too far to the overly romanticized version of the bearded grandfather whittling on the front porch and all that, which
Yeah.
fine. But something that can convey a little bit, I'm reluctant to say truthfulness in photography, because that can take you down a road of really interesting conversation. Not that photography isn't true, but or untrue, but I guess what I mean is like just more of a balance, more of a nuance to kind of complicate the narrative that has been out there for so long that this place is just this, and what we've encouraged people to do and been wonderfully surprised by are the people who leave their cars and visit with people and return and establish relationships with people and give prints to people and become Facebook friends with people and really kind of build a community around this identity and are able to use a camera to do that.
Yeah, it's a great thing and a great project, and I'm with you 100% on the idea of trying to get to the truth of the matter, try to be unblinking, and not romanticize it as well. We struggle with that at the museum too. I don't want to turn Blair Mountain into some romanticized thing. I mean, it was at the end of the day people running up a hill towards machine guns. You can romanticize revolution until the blood starts flowing, and then it's it's a little different. So we really try to battle with that. So since I've segued over into the museum, let's talk about this exhibit. One of the great things about this new space that people will eventually get to see, we have a whole section for temporary exhibitions, and we wanted to do this for a long time. We've had a couple of temporary exhibitions in the original space, but you've been in there. You see how small it is and how limited and cramped everything was. So now we have a big spare space that we can bring in new ideas and creative ways to look at the mine wars and to look at the coal fields. And it's led us to our first one, which you're taking care of for us, the Then and Now project. And I have to be honest, there's not a lot I know about this. We had a board meeting when we were brainstorming about potential temporary exhibitions. This was a little over a year and a half ago almost.
Mm-hmm.
And we fixed on that one. Courtney Boyd said, I'll get a hold of Roger May and take it off. And the great thing about working at the museum with the group that we work with is you can just trust somebody to take off with the project, and it's going to be really good at the end, and you don't have to worry about it. So
yeah,
and it's a rare thing to have people that dependable and that talented to work with. So
right.
All I know is the general concept behind it. And then when you sent me an email asking me about the ballpark at Madison a few months back when you were searching for that spot. So tell me about how the project got started and what your approach was and all that.
Yeah, so Sean from the museum reached out to me, a year and a half ago and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this thing to, it's and we want you to be a part of it. What do you think about this? And I mean, I think I had already made up my mind before we got off the phone that it was something that I wanted to do because, I grew up not far from Mate One. I grew up in a coal mining family that did not teach me about Blair Mountain or armed struggle, or the struggle to unionize in the coal fields. Our people were union people, but I didn't know about the history of the mine wars, and I didn't know the significance that Mingo County and surrounding areas played, and so this notion of making photographs for an exhibit that would be in an exhibit space in Matewan was really mind-blowing to me, to think that, as a little kid running around Matewan or, Mingo County, that I would someday be able to share photographs there. This will be the first time that I've exhibited work in Mingo County,
Really?
which is really high honor for me. And so the idea was simply, to look at some historical photographs of the Mine Wars era, and identify some key locations where those pictures were made, and to not necessarily go out and make new photographs in the exact spot and try to put those pictures side by side, but rather go to those locations or those communities, and just through my aesthetic and my perspective, to photograph those spaces as they are now, or whether they were remnants of the former places, or if they were just sort of more of conceptual photographs of those spaces, and then to just think about what has transpired in that 100-year approximate span of time, and in some ways it was not a lot had changed, in terms of the topography, and if you close your eyes and just listen for a while and try to think back to what it must have been like 100 years ago to be in that space. And then, in other ways, there's a night and day difference between what was happening in some of those places 100 years ago. And so it was pretty
places that you've been.
Yeah. So one of the places that I went was up in kind of the head of Cabin Creek, and found one of the
bunker.
One of the last remaining bunkers that I'm aware of, that was sort of this fortified structure that the mine guards constructed to sort of defend the mine from striking armed miners. And as someone who was in the military, and you think about strategic placement of armed forces, and sectors of fire and vantage points and things like that, to find this thing, and then to realize that automatic weapons were set up in these bunkers and aimed at striking miners and maybe even their families, was pretty harrowing, pretty moving to just kind of sit still in this space and kind of take it all in. So that was one area that it's pretty remote today, and I can only imagine 100 years ago what that must have been.
You have that picture? Can you?
Yeah. Let me share that
up there.
Yeah.
No, I've been over there to Cabin Creek a number of times. It's been a few years. Last time I was there, I was with Kenny King and Stan Bumgarner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like something that you would expect to find in northern France.
Yeah.
It looks like something that should be a relic of World War I, or some of these defenses that Rommel put up to stop the Normandy invasion or something like that. You don't expect this in a quiet little rural Appalachian community. Did you go
Yeah,
inside?
it really it was really I just profound. I mean, the notion that I was sitting in sort of enemy territory and just trying to take in what these guys must have been thinking. Whether they were actively anti-union and anti-miner, or if they were like other people were just trying to sort of provide for their families and do their job and hope to God they didn't have to pull the trigger. But from this perspective, it was just sort of chilling to consider what was going on during the construction of this, and then what was going on, some of the conversations that might have happened inside of this thing while these guards were waiting to defend this piece of land. I mean, it was really, really profound.
I'm sure you went in it, right?
Oh yeah, I've got video footage inside of it and all around it. In fact, on the top of it is actually sort of written into the cement before it dried was the date, and I have a photograph of that somewhere as well. But it's really something that it's relatively inaccessible. A lot of people don't know it's there, and it's something that really should be publicly accessible, and more people should know about it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Love the photograph, and I love the spot too. Lots of great stuff over on Cabin Creek and Paint Creek that needs to be preserved over there. That's a whole nother saga, though.
Yeah.
Any other? Show me another one. Let's look at a couple of these. We have a couple of minutes, I think.
So here, did that one come up
on
the screen? Yeah. So this is up there in Cabin Creek as well. And this is the confluence of Cabin Creek and maybe it's 10 Mile or and this just this just shows the acid mine drainage, which is probably present in both streams, but the one on the right is far more noticeable. And again, it's just a byproduct of mining that coal companies have been allowed to sort of get away with so much in terms of the environmental impact that they've caused through their process. And you hear about it, or maybe you don't know about acid mine drainage, but this is just a picture that I think illustrates a little bit about what that looks like, and sort of the remnant of kind of what we're left with today. And that's up in Cabin Creek as well.
Cabin Creek is filled with that runoff all up and down the creek.
Yeah.
That looks like the MoDowell County Courthouse we're looking at now.
And this is, of course, most people know this is where Sid Hatfield and Ed Chambers were murdered as they were coming to court to try to get things cleared up. They left their weapons in the hotel room, I believe, and they were met at the top of the steps by some Baldwin Felts agents who just opened fire on them in broad daylight and right in front of their wives. And I make a point anytime I'm in or around Welch to go here, oftentimes even without my camera. I don't even bother getting my camera out, but try to walk these steps and think about what that must have been like on that day, and how it really turned. It was a historical day in a number of reasons, but how it really set so many things in motion that they probably never knew would set in motion. And again, kind of sacred ground for me and many other people.
Yeah. A lot of history happens around West Virginia courthouses.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting stuff. A lot of them burnt down too. There was somewhere in the neighborhood from the Civil War to 1900, somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 county courthouses burned down. Many of which in parts of the state where land records were really important, and
Yeah.
a lot of land records got wiped out.
Sure.
And that time, right around the broad form deed started showing up.
Conveniently.
Conveniently, yeah. Well, I can't wait to see the rest of the exhibition once it gets out, and it's, I think, necessary to trying to constantly connect the past with the present. It's one of the things we want to do. We want to make it relevant as possible, and I think that your work is a great way of bringing that to home.
Well, I appreciate that, and likewise, I feel like the Mine Wars Museum does such an incredibly great job of kind of grabbing you by the shoulders with history, which is often hard to do. I mean, I'm a history nerd, but for people that aren't, that they find it hard to be interested in history. I think the way that you all have designed the museum and the spaces and the artifacts and the memorabilia, it's very arresting and does such a good job of pulling you in. And once you're there, you're kind of hooked. So I'm proud to be a part of that work, and really look forward to being able to reconvene in person and hang out in that new space.
Yeah, can't wait for that day to happen, and can't wait for you to see the news, what we've done with the new space, and I'm really excited about all that. Roger, thanks so much for joining me. I know that you need to get to Alum Creek and get some things taken care of this evening, but thanks for taking the time to visit with me and talk with this episode of Mine Wars Forum. And to people that are watching, remember, click on a link where you can go to the museum's website and become a member or donate, or also buy a t-shirt or a ball cap or something like that to support the museum while we can't be open. Thanks again, Roger, and see you next time.
Appreciate you, Chuck. Thanks.